Progress continues on the content management system. I've completed, or essentially completed, a logs module for the back end of the CMS, as well as core infrastructure for reading from and writing to logs. Briefly, I'm going to talk about the static class that helps do all the back-end lifting, and then I'll show kind of where I have these logging statements in place. And then I'll talk about the module that I created, and then we'll do some demonstrations. So it's pretty simple. Static class, you just got an object to manage locking the file so you don't have multiple threads trying to write to the file at the same time. Yeah, that's a static object, so there's only one across the entire application. And then you've got the option of having separate directories for success and error events. Right now I have them configured to the same directory. And then there's basically just a couple of functions around reading. There's 3 public functions and then 1 private that gets called under the hood. And then same thing for writing, 3 public functions and 1 private that gets called under the hood. So for reading a log, if you're just using the function called read, then it defaults to reading the success log. Otherwise, you can explicitly read from the success log, and you can pass in a specific file name if you want to. Same for explicitly reading error logs. And then under the hood, this is calling a function that takes a directory, a file name, and whether or not it's a success or an error. There's a bunch of checks. Does the directory exist? Does the file exist? It's using some defaults for file names, so on and so forth. And ultimately, it's just doing file.readAllText. And then for writing, very similar structure. So if you're just calling the function termed write, then it assumes that you're writing to the success directory using all the defaults. Otherwise, you can explicitly write to success directories or write to error directories. Under the hood, it's using this private function that takes a directory, a file name, some content to write, whether or not to show a date timestamp, and whether it's a success or an error. And then very similar to reading, you got a bunch of guards and checks around does the directory, does the file exist, using some defaults for the file name. And then you lock file access, and then you are using a stream writer to just append text to a file. And you can see some examples over here on the right-hand side of the date timestamp that precedes the line. It's about as accurate as you can be in C#, getting down to less than a millisecond. So that is the static class. Now let me switch around and show kind of where I have some logging statements. So one of the places that I have logging statements is the not found handler, and that's where I'm writing to the error log. So I'm just calling log.writeError, and I'm just passing it a string. And because I'm not passing it a directory or file name or any of that, it's just using defaults. And so essentially what this is doing is it's just going to say 404 not found, and it's going to spit out the path, and it's going to spit out the query, because this is in an if statement that is asserting that a query exists. Now, if there is no query string, then we're going to write the same string, but without the query portion here. So this is kind of attached to the not found handler just to get something writing to the error log. And then I have over here in the routing module at the back end, I've stuffed in a couple lines. When you're deleting a routing rule, right here, I'm initializing a JavaScript serializer, and then I'm saying log.write, and then the string that I'm writing is routing rule deleted, and then I'm appending to the end of that string the serialization of the JSON representation of the routing rule that we're deleting. So in that way, we're populating both the error logs and the success logs. So now let's switch over to the right-hand side of the screen here. So when I click on logs, that's going to pull a fresh copy from both the most current error logs and most current success logs. So I'm thinking in the future, I'm going to add maybe a small section here to the settings page. It might only have one setting, which is how many days to hold on to success logs or error logs, and possibly also to configure the directories, kind of what we saw here in the static class for log. So maybe configuring these directly in settings. I don't know how complicated I want to make the tool, but I probably will have a drop down to say hold on to success logs for 1, 3, 7, 15, 30 days, whatever. And then basically here, rather than having like a file system navigator where you're selecting a specific log to look at, we're just showing you a stream of errors and a stream of successes. And I'm just thinking it'll append all the various logs back to back, top to bottom. So the oldest are at the top and newest are at the bottom. And you can see here that the error log currently has a lot of data in it, and you can scroll. And you can see it automatically scrolls to the bottom, which would be the most recent. And you can see that it is because we're appending a date stamp here. And the most recent entry is bolded so that you can see it more easily at a glance. And then you'll notice there's also an animation for some dynamic height. You'll notice that the page itself does not have a scroll bar, and that's by design. So each of these viewports are within 1 pixel of each other in height, and they're of such a height that you fill the vertical size of the browser window without creating a scroll bar, at least within reason. Now, if I shrunk the browser to 100 pixels tall, then obviously there would be a dual scroll bar. But by design, I'm trying to avoid having a scroll bar on both the page and the content. I want to have one scroll bar for any given location on the vertical axis. So now I want to go right to some of these logs. So I think first I'm going to just go delete the logs and just show that it handles it gracefully. And I'm hoping that it does now that I've said that. So in the root directory, CMS logs, which is what we have defined in our static class, this is our error and success log for today. And there would be one for each day for however many days you hold on to them. I'm going to delete these. Okay, so there are no logs. I'm going to refresh this page, and so we can see that it handles it gracefully. When the files are missing, it just doesn't show anything. Now, I'm going to switch over to this tab here where I have a bunch of nonsense in the address bar. So this is going to call the 404. In fact, I'm just going to type more nonsense in. I'll press enter. And so we've still got all of our debugging messages here, but the important thing is down here, we can see that we've called the not found handler, which we know writes to the error log, and we can see the error log here in the file system. So now when we go back to our logs, we can see there's an entry here, and we can also see that even when there's a single line, it correctly shows it at the bottom and shows it bold. Now, let me just go back here, and I'm just going to refresh this. Maybe I'll do one with no query string, and then we'll go back here and refresh. And so we can see some examples, like all of these have query strings, but the one here does not. Now let's get some successes going. So I'm going to switch over to the routing module, and I'm just going to type something in at random, and then we'll delete it. And that delete action just wrote to the success log. And now we can see here in the file system that our success log exists. And so now I'm going to go over here to logs, and we can see down at the bottom the latest entry is bolded, and we can see here that the JSON representation of the rule that we just removed exists in the log. And of course, we can log whatever we want, and you got to be a little bit careful if it's anything sensitive. I'm just logging this for demonstration purposes. But in reality, maybe I would just log just the ID, but not all the details. Or maybe I would just say a routing rule was deleted by such and such user. And then of course we've already got the date time here. But that's pretty much it. Now it's a lot faster to write to the error log because I can just refresh the 404 handler here. A lot faster to do that than to write to the success log because I don't have a bunch of success logs hooked up. Oh, I didn't do that quite enough to create a scroll bar. Let me just refresh a few more times. And there we go. Now we see a scroll bar. And again, if I didn't mention it already, upon page load, it automatically scrolls you to the bottom, which is the most recent stuff, and then it bolds the most recent entry. Now, I thought for a while about having some buttons, such as a refresh button, but refresh is built into how the page works when you click on this logs tile here. So there's no need for a specific refresh button. I also believe there's no need for a download button because it's in a browser and you can hit Control F, or maybe I could put a little search box in here. But you can search for content and you can see all the content. Yeah, maybe it would be useful to download, but I don't think that's a critical enough function that I'm going to add it in. Again, similar to other features, it would be easy enough to add a button with that action in. So I didn't see it necessary to have a download button or a refresh button or a file navigator. What else did I think about? Well, I thought about having a delete or a clear button, but again, I went back to just a setting to say how many days to hold on to logs, and then that's just how many days worth of logs you show. And originally I was thinking of having two sections, kind of like I have here, but I was thinking that the top section would just be the most recent error, and that the bottom section would be everything, successes and errors, all stitched together. And ultimately, this is what I decided on, and I've colorized it a little bit, red and green. So hopefully this makes sense. I'm happy with it. There's literally no buttons, no controls, and so you can't get much simpler than this at all. So that's the logging module, and we'll keep going from here in a future video. Thanks for watching.